I don't know about you, but my TBR is out of control. I have so many books on my physical TBR that I haven't read, and there are still more really exciting new releases coming along all the time. So I have to be really disciplined with myself and make sure that I get to those older books. So that's what today's vlog is all about. Now, if we're really going back, which we are, we're going back to some of the oldest books on my physical TBR. They are from the days when I worked in a school. I was just setting out in my journey learning about mental health and well-being. I worked ridiculously long hours and so had very little time for reading. So most of the books that I used to pick up way back when would have been non-fiction, quite often based around mental health and well-being. So we have a whole stack of 4 non-fiction books, which is perfect because it's non-fiction November, which I'm hoping to get to in this vlog. The first is Joan Didion's Year of Magical Thinking. This is Joan's memoir following the death of her husband, and I've heard really brilliant things about Joan Didion's writing, but also that this is super sad. So that's our first book. The next book is Hot Feminist by Vernon. This is a book that I picked up in Hay Festival, I think in 2018, so that's quite a while ago. The next book that I have is The Paradox of Choice. This is by Barry Schwartz. This is capturing Barry's study of how too much choice can be bad for our mental health and well-being. The subline says how the culture of abundance robs us of satisfaction. I used to teach a little bit in PSHE about mental health and well-being, and quite often referred to Rob Schwartz's work, so it's probably very overdue that I've read the full book. And the last book that I have is The Heartland by Nathan Filer. This is Nathan's book about psychosis. Nathan Filer is a really brilliant writer. He wrote The Shock of the Fall, which is his work of fiction, and he's also written another non-fiction book, something along the lines of This Book Will Change Your Mind About Mental Health, or something like that. So Nathan is not only an author but was a mental health nurse, and so has really first-hand experience of working with people with mental illnesses. And this is his book about psychosis. So I'm really looking forward to reading that. Shamefully, it's a hardback. When would I? This was another Hay Festival purchase. I got my Hay Festival ticket. Does it say a date? It's the 31st of May. I can't see a year. Cost me 15 quid. 2019. So those are the 4 books that I am hoping to get to in this vlog, so that they can stop haunting me. So let's hope in reading these I can exercise them from haunting my TBR. God, I find filming intros like really difficult. I don't know what to say, you know. Good morning. It is Saturday and today I'm going to a chocolate making workshop. It's my mum's Christmas present from me to her, and we're going to make spiced somethings and chocolate Santas, I think. So that's what we're off to do today. I've no idea how appropriate it will be to film, but if I can, I will, and if I don't, I'll show you what we make. Good evening. We had the most lovely time at the chocolate workshop this morning. We did, we had like painted chocolate moulds. So Mum did a Father Christmas and I did a Christmas tree, and they were lovely. And then we made some filled salted caramel truffles. It was lush. We had such a nice time. It was a really, really good time. If you're in Bristol, it was called Zara's Chocolates, or if you're close to Bristol, I really recommend it. They're all booked up this year, but next year, do go. It was great. We had a nice time. And I've bought a lot of chocolate related Christmas presents. I am here to say I have started The Year of Magical Thinking, and I've read a chapter and a bit, and it's very emotive already. So this is about the author's husband dying. So that's what's gone on in the first chapter. I find it incredibly moving when people talk about grief in the most plain and mundane ways. I know it's a silly thing to say, but I think we probably see so much of extreme stuff, whether it's in the news or whether it's in TV and film, that we can almost become desensitized to it. So when we're faced with something very plain, it kind of creeps up on you and hits you in the gut. So, for example, Joan's husband has a heart attack at home. She calls an ambulance, they go to hospital, he dies. But when she gets home from the hospital, she's confronted with the jacket and scarf that he took off and left on a chair. And, you know, she's not poring over the emotions that came up for her in that moment. She's just describing the experience. Like, she's just describing, you know, in a very factual way that, you know, that was the first thing that she noticed when she walked in the door after getting home alone from the hospital. She's noticed his coat and scarf that he'd taken off, you know, a short time earlier, just on a chair. I just find that mundanity incredibly moving. Yeah, that's what I mean. I hope that makes sense. She's just being very matter of fact, but even in that, it's, yeah, very, very emotive. So that's the start. I've literally just a few pages in. I'm going to carry that on, but I suspect I might need to go a bit slow with this one. Tomorrow we are, again, I'm having a day out with my mum. We're going to a wedding fair, and for afternoon tea, my sister's getting married next year. It's not me. My sister's getting married next year. So we're going to her wedding venue. They're having a wedding fair, so we get to see all of the rooms set up as they would be. And yeah, we're going for a nice afternoon tea there. So that will be lovely. Another really nice day to look forward to tomorrow. Hello, I am halfway through The Year of Magical Thinking, and I am all the way through a rather large gin. So please bear with me and my rosy cheeks. I am having an interesting time with this book. It's everything that people say it is. It's very beautifully written. Joan Didion is a really extraordinary writer, and I'd be really interested to read some of the other stuff that she's written. This book begins at the start with her husband dying, and the premise is that it's about her thoughts on grief and her response to that in the immediate year that follows. The things that I'm enjoying are the meditative, repetitive nature of some of her writing. I think that's really very beautiful. In the same way as we would in our thoughts, she kind of circles back to kind of key points, and I think it creates a very poignant space. I'm enjoying that very much. I'm also really appreciating her attention to detail and not relying on stereotypes or things that we would expect somebody to say about grief. She's talking about her actual thoughts and feelings and responses at different moments, and I am really appreciating that. I am at a point where, so really tragically, at the same time as her husband died, her daughter was in hospital very unwell. And although she got better, she then also deteriorated and became unwell again and spent quite a considerable amount of time in hospital, very, very unwell. I am not getting so much out of Joan's account of that time as I was of her accounting for the moments after her husband died. I am enjoying her reflecting on the way that she thought in those moments, as opposed to the actual detail of what's happening with her daughter. I'm sorry if that's really a heartless thing to say. So yeah, we'll see how the rest of the book goes and whether it leans in one direction or the other. I am not keen to pick it up. I think because it's quite heavy in its subject matter. Yeah, I'm not rushing back to it. It's very easy to read. It's very beautifully and really simple. It's my kind of writing. It's simple yet very beautiful. She's doing a great job of capturing how thoughts can spiral without it feeling too much like stream of consciousness, because I don't like that. But I'm not rushing to pick it up. It's a fact. So yeah, that's where we are with this, and now I'm going to go and get another gin.
Who's kidding you, girl? You seem like trouble. Oh no, yo, baby. Shouldn't you be somewhere with folks your age, like a cemetery?
Hello, I finished The Year of Magical Thinking by Joan Didion. I have no idea how coherent I was or not, as the case is probably in my last clip when I talked about this, having rinsed quite a lot of gin. So let me very briefly summarise what the book is about, what I liked and what I didn't like, kind of Roro read style. So Joan Didion's husband dies of a heart attack whilst her daughter is in hospital in a coma. And this book captures the year that follows, and it's written in a very reflective style, focusing predominantly on how her thoughts responded to those events. What I liked: Joan Didion's writing is very beautiful. She's obviously an accomplished author. That was her job before she wrote this. She uses key statements, quotes, phrases that are drawn from quotes from poetry, things that she has said, things that her husband said, things that her daughter said, thoughts that she'd had. And she uses those key phrases as kind of pillars and circles back to them throughout the book. I thought that was a really beautiful way of structuring the book. It made it quite a meditative read, but also really successfully captured how thoughts can be circular without going too much down the route of being stream of consciousness, because I don't like that. It wasn't that at all. It had much more structure than that, but it did kind of like circle back to these key thoughts and phrases, and when they dropped in your gut. There were some really exceptionally poignant moments where it really felt like you'd taken a haymaker to the face in what she was describing. And it was very moving throughout. I found myself tearing up quite a few times reading this. I think she did a really extraordinary job of capturing really what grief is and means, and the kind of disorder of your thoughts after an event like that, and after losing somebody who has been so much part of the very fabric of your being, of your day-to-day life for so long. And there weren't any cliches in here. She gave a very frank and almost simplistic, but effectively so, and an effectively simplistic account of how she thought and reflected on her life with her husband in the months after he died. The bits that didn't work for me so much, part of the way that she coped was to lean quite heavily into medical research, particularly around her daughter being unwell. Her daughter was gravely ill for several months after her husband died. She did a lot to actively research and try to understand the terminology that was being used and thrown at her at this time by all the consultants and medical professionals. Those sections lost me. I much preferred her being out of the moment and reflecting on her thinking and her grief than kind of looking at the nitty-gritty, but understand that was part of her thinking and her processing and her grieving. So that's what didn't work so well for me. I have not flown through this book. It's quite short and the writing is very accessible, and yet I really struggled to keep going back to it, probably because of the heavy nature of the book, I suspect, but also because of that latter point about it getting a little bit medicalised and academic at times, which lost me. I'm an emotional person. I need to stick with the emotions. So those are my thoughts on The Year of Magical Thinking. I'm very glad to have read it, and it does make me want to tell everybody that I love how much I love them right now. Okay, so next I am picking up The Paradox of Choice by Barry Schwartz. I have started this on audio, so I'm just going to continue with the book. Schwartz is a psychologist, and his area of specialism is understanding how some degree of choice is helpful to us, but too much can be harmful to our well-being. So that's what the book is about. So far, it's very good, and I will give you another update on that separately.
Decorator couldn't fit the carpet back down, so we have to get a carpet fitter in next week. They've had to get another slot with them.
Hello, I have finished The Paradox of Choice by Barry Schwartz. This is all about how the culture of abundance is detrimental to our sense of satisfaction. So what Barry's saying is a little bit of choice is good for our sense of independence and good to have a sense of autonomy, but too much choice can be detrimental and actually harmful to our well-being. So for example, if I was to ask you, you were going to the supermarket and you said, Kerry, do you want anything? And I said, yes, could you get me some pasta? You would go to the supermarket and then you might be overwhelmed with choice, because do you pick fresh pasta? Do you pick dried pasta? Do you pick artisanal pasta? Which shape do you pick? Which price point do you pick? Which brand do you pick? You could be confronted, for something fairly straightforward, with an overwhelming amount of choice, which ultimately doesn't have a huge amount of impact on the outcome. So yeah, it's all about that essentially. So he takes into consideration things that impact choice, like a sense of regret. Social comparison is a really fundamental part of how we make choices. And certainly he doesn't talk about, I wonder when this was written actually, he doesn't talk about things like social media and the kind of like unreal amount of advertising that we're confronted with, and that kind of influencer culture, I guess, that would play partly into that kind of element of social comparison and how that impacts on our choices. He talks about FOMO and how they can impact on our sense of choice. And when he's talking about choice, he's not just talking about stuff that we buy, he's talking about like the choices that we make about who we are as people too. The other thing he talks about is expectation deficit, and how satisfied we are with a choice fundamentally comes down to what degree it meets our expectations. So if you're sitting a test and you're expecting to get an A grade but you get a B grade, that leads to a sense of dissatisfaction. If you're sitting a test and you're expecting to get a C grade but you get a B grade, that leads to a sense of greater satisfaction, and the outcome is exactly the same. So that's what he's talking about in terms of expectation deficit. He also talks about hedonism and how that plays a part in how we make choices, and how when we find things that give us pleasure, we experience that rush of dopamine, but our brains really quickly become used to that and so want more and more and more of that thing. And that's the kind of hedonistic treadmill that we talk about. So he takes all of that into consideration. He also has this theory, which I used to teach about actually, that people can be either maximisers or satisficers. So when we're making a decision, a maximiser is somebody who deliberates over every possible angle that could influence that decision. They want to go to every single shop that sells trainers when they're looking for trainers. They want to know what the carbon footprint is. They want to know what the latest trends is. They want all of the information in order to be able to make a choice, and that can lead to huge amounts of expectation deficit and FOMO and all of those things that can be harmful when we're making choices. The other type of person is a satisficer, so maximizer and satisficer. A satisficer is somebody who is happy to make a decision that is good enough in the moment. Obviously, sometimes decisions like buying a house, for example, probably need you to be a bit of a maximizer, whereas what flavour muffin you get probably needs you to be a bit of a satisficer. So we need both elements of those in our lives, but it's healthier for us to lean more into the satisficer end of the spectrum so that we can make decisions without feeling completely crippled by them. I thought it was really good. It reinforced some of the stuff that I know about Barry Schwartz's work, and went into a bit more detail. It was super accessible. All of the anecdotes and examples that he used to demonstrate his points were really relatable. I have to say I felt this quite acutely thinking about books and my physical TBR especially, and yeah, choice around that can be really paralysing, like when you're choosing your next read or when I'm choosing what vlog to film next. I have a lot of choice and that doesn't always feel great actually. So yeah, feeling that very personally in relation to my reading life, among other things. But yeah, thought this was a really super good book, and this was time really well spent. I'm glad that I read it. I am next picking up Hot Feminist by Polly Vernon. This says, it is a smart, compelling guide to living in an empowered and fashionable way. Hot Feminist isn't about what women can't do. This is about what you can do, what you can think, what you can wear, what you can wax. This is a modern feminism with style without judgment. I don't think I would buy this today. And isn't that the beauty of this vlog and this little experiment, that it's giving pause for thought about some of the oldest books on my TBR and how long they should be there. So anyway, here we go. Polly Vernon and Hot Feminist is up next. just out for a walk with the hounds, and it is the most beautiful autumnal day. The sun is shining. It's kind of mid-afternoon, which at the moment at this time of year is only a couple of hours away from sunset, so the sun is quite low in the sky and the light through the trees is beautiful. The colours, you can see behind me, the colours of the leaves, it's Brennan. The colours on the leaves are just stunning. It's beautiful, and it's not cold, but it's got that crisp nip in the air. Oh, it's perfect. If you were to describe the most perfect autumnal day, this is it. Crunchy leaves underfoot. Yeah, can't beat it. Gosh, this is not very good. I never DNF books because I'm pathologically unable to do so. I'm a completionist, but I really think I probably should DNF this. Polly Vernon is trying to say that we shouldn't gatekeep feminism, and basically as a feminist you should be able to wear what you want. I think I've achieved saying that much better than she has in here. She's trying to say, like, your old school feminists shouldn't be judgmental about we young hip feminists who care about fashion, and I'm not sure that they are. And in doing so, she's actually being a bit judgmental about feminists who don't care about fashion. She's not saying anything goes. She's saying, as a hot feminist, you can sort of dismiss a lot of the foundations of feminism and be a bit judgy about people who don't care about fashion and who don't shave their armpits and all that sort of thing. So in saying we shouldn't be judgmental, she's being a bit judgmental. The other thing, which is not good, is she has said things like, she's making the point that rape is bad, which is a good point to make. She's right, rape is bad, but rape culture is fine. So she quite likes it when people wolf whistle in the street and harass her and give her unsolicited attention. She quite likes it when her boss calls her babe. That's okay, but no acknowledgement that there are many people who wouldn't be okay with that, and why it's important that we operate in a world of consent and respect. She sort of says that she acknowledges there's a link between rape culture and rape, but it dismisses it at the same time. It's just gutting. Like, young women will be reading this and thinking, yeah, you're right, that's all of that behaviour is okay when it's not. One of the things that I think she's done well is she's talked about this sense of fear of getting it wrong, FOGIW, fear of getting it wrong, and how that can mean that sometimes we don't engage with politics or feminism, for example, because we're so worried about doing it wrong. And I think that's a good point to make. The end. I'm not that far through so far. I'm not sure how I'm feeling about continuing. I'm feeling very conflicted because the completionist in me has to finish this book, but I am pretty confident I'm not going to get much out of it. Oh, sigh. I guess I'll let you know. I think I've identified the problem. I think it's that she's writing from a perspective of her own personal thoughts and feelings and not applying that to the wider world. So I've just read a chapter called Thin, where she shares an article that she wrote for a magazine, and it got a lot of backlash because she was describing how she'd accidentally lost a lot of weight and the kind of social ramifications of that, and her conclusion being that she liked it and she liked being thin. Her delivery was incredibly insensitive and lacked nuance or thought, or seemingly lacked care for people who might have other experiences or feelings towards thinness. It didn't land very well, and she's reflecting on that. She's essentially, though, making the point that she likes her body, and she spells it out that she likes her body, she likes everybody, and she thinks that people should be happy in their bodies if that's what they want, and if they don't want to diet, they shouldn't. So I think what she thinks about body shape is fine, but she's just got a really cack-handed way of saying things which doesn't feel hugely feminist. I think that's the issue. I think she's thinking about, well, it's fine for me, but not linking that with the bigger picture. I think that's the issue that I have with this book. Right, I have finished Hot Feminist. Towards the end of this book, Polly Vernon recounts her experience of being a victim of an attempted rape, sexual assault, which is pretty horrific and should definitely be treated as a trigger warning. And she rages, righteously so, at the fact that her perpetrator, despite the fact that he was unusually caught almost straight away and confessed straight away, all the way to the courts, as she describes it, he only received a suspended sentence and a £500 fine, which he pays her £5 at a time. It's abhorrent, and she's right to be absolutely furious about it. The end of this book is little kind of paragraphs of her hot takes on other stuff that could be related to feminism. So there's something about twerking, something about Victoria Beckham, something about banter. So they're just short little sections with minor headings with a little hot take from her. One of which is TV's apparently insatiable hunger for crime dramas which revolve around the abduction, imprisonment, defilement and murder of scores of pretty young women. This is what Polly has to say about it. Boring and also unrealistic. Those sorts of fetishistic serial killings almost never happen. Now, literally, as I have been reading, I've had a notification from BBC News pop up to say that there is a manhunt going on for a husband who has killed his wife and shoved her in the boot of her car. I think it's pretty realistic. I think what she's saying is that we shouldn't make entertainment of it, but it's clumsy. The next heading is the victimification of women. This is what Polly says. Duff, so very duff. Stuff is not brilliant for women. There's a shitload of work still to be done, but it needs to be approached from a position of strength and possibility, not from a place of, oh, poor us. We are victims of some stuff, of some situations, and certainly of a general injustice, but we must not define ourselves as victims. I wonder if the poor woman stuffed into the boot of her car by her husband would define herself as a victim. I really think that there has been some really solid, great advice in here, but it's so saturated with bullshit that it's really hard to distill. Yeah, I think the intention here is legit, but the delivery is painfully clumsy, which has resulted in it verging on offensive. Oh, what a shame. what a real shame. So that was The Hot Feminist by Polly Vernon. We are finished. Next is The Heartland by Nathan Filer, and this is a book all about schizophrenia. Hello. I am here with an update about The Heartland by Nathan Filer, but it's not the update that perhaps you're expecting. So I both have and have not finished this book. So let me tell you, I picked it up and started reading and I was like, oh, this is really familiar. But I remember Nathan reading from the very first chapter when I went to see him speak about this book when it was released at Hay Festival, and it's a really powerful first chapter. So it's him recounting an occasion where, as a mental health nurse, he was required to physically restrain a patient in order to medicate them, and he was just really empathising with that patient. So that person was experiencing psychosis and not only believed, but because of their delusions, knew that they were being poisoned by the people around them, and so didn't want to take their medication. And they knew that the water in the hospital where they were staying was contaminated and was going to do them harm, so they weren't showering, and that's all really understandable. You would do the same if that was true for you. But obviously this person was experiencing an episode of psychosis and those delusions were doing them harm, and so they needed to be medicated by force. And it's Nathan kind of reflecting on that occasion. So it's a really powerful, memorable first chapter. So I was like, okay, that makes sense. I also went into the place on the internet where I record what I'm reading, which is 3 places. So I use Goodreads and Storygraph and Fable, don't ask. And to start off with, it seemed to be confusing this book with the other book of Nathan's that I have read. Oh, well, that's annoying. But that happened on Goodreads and then on Storygraph and then on Fable too, which was weird. Anyway, all turns out that this book is the book that I've read. They changed the bloody title. They changed the title when they released it in paperback instead of hardback. Who does that? Who does that? How annoying is that? So this one was The Heartland, Finding and Losing Schizophrenia, and this one is the book. This book will change your mind about mental health. Why would you do that? So I've read it. I read it in 2022 and it's very good. So it's more generally about mental health, but a lot of Nathan's experience of mental illness is related to psychosis and people living with schizophrenia. He essentially talks about how the system is not designed to accept and support people with living with mental illness. From how we diagnose people, he talks about the language that we use a lot, and how we treat and respond to people living with mental illness, specifically delusions. So it's a very brilliant book, and it did change how I think about mental health. And I've read it, so don't need to read it again. But how annoying is that? Really, really annoying. So I have this book twice and didn't even know. So anyway, we're good. So that means that we have come to the end of this vlog. I have exorcised those ghosts of books haunting my TBR for many years. And I do feel much better for it, actually. I will do this again. I also want to acknowledge and kind of apologise for the chaos of this vlog, given that it probably should have been released in October during kind of Halloween season, given that I'm talking about hauntings and doing silly things with this video editing, and also the fact that there have been Christmas activities thrown in there. It's kind of I appreciate the cognitive dissonance that will have created, and I'm sorry for it, but you know, that's that's what I've been able to offer. I am not that booktuber who really meticulously plans what they're filming when. I also wanted to just say I've had a lot of fun doing the kind of, I mentioned just then the editing of this video, those silly bits about kind of being haunted by the books. One of the 5 ways to well-being is to keep learning, and that can actually be quite a hard thing to do, certainly as you get older or busier or whatever. So I've really enjoyed pushing myself to do something a bit silly and a bit different in this video, and mess around with editing and learn a new skill, learn how to use masking. I hope you've enjoyed it. But yes, it's been good for me. I've had a good time. I've had a mixed time with my reading, but I have had a really good time messing around with the editing. So I hope you've enjoyed it. Anyway, I want to say, you know, your time is really precious, and I'm very grateful to you for spending it with me, and I'll see you again in the next video.